morning, it's Friday, April the 11th, 2008. We're at the Bob Stump VA Medical Center in the library in Prescott, Arizona. My name is Bob Hood, and with us today are
Patsy Ray, camera operator.
Ed Carter, I'm an observer.
and it's my pleasure to introduce Richard Strong. Good morning, Richard, and welcome to the Veterans History Project. Let's begin with a little information about you before your active duty in the service, in the Army, okay? Where were you born and where'd you grow up?
I was born in Waconia, Minnesota
Okay.
in 1926 and lived there until I moved into Minneapolis. My father went to work for the University of Minnesota in 1940 and we moved into Minneapolis. I was with my grandfather in La Crosse, Wisconsin when the Germans attacked Poland. That was in 1939, of course. And I remember that very clearly. And then I was with my grandfather, was also visiting us in Minneapolis on when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941. So I stayed in Minneapolis, went to high school there, was drafted in 1944, and went to Fort Snelling, Minneapolis. And from there I was sent to Fort McClellan, Alabama.
Fun place.
Yeah,
Yeah. Fun place.
yeah. But I had a lot of people who wanted me to enlist in the Navy or in the Air Force. I had a couple of uncles who were flyers, and they wanted me to become a flyer. I was the oldest grandson in the family. And I just had the attitude, I'm not going to have anyone tell me what to do.
Well, that's
So
good.
I didn't like water. I didn't
Yeah.
want to go in the Navy. I thought the worst thing in the world would be on a ship and it'd get hit and you'd be dumped in the ocean.
Uh-huh.
So I just went in the Army.
Right.
And I was very small. I was the same height as I am now. I was 5'11", 11 and a half, and I weighed 126 pounds. So it was rather slight. So I ended up at Fort Snelling through a connection I had there. There was a colonel there that I had caddied for at the Minnetonka Club. And he said, you know, you can stay here all a while. And what I do, did it for about a week and a half. I'd march guys around and show them the films and things like that, you know. And I was young enough, I thought, if I'm going to be in the service, I want to do some fighting. So they said, well, they're forming some replacements going down to Fort McClellan that are going to be trained to fight in the Orient. So I said, well, I'll go down there. So I did. I got down there, and they said, boy, you're awful small to be, and light to be in the infantry. I don't think you can, medical officer says, I don't think you can handle the training. I says, you just wait and see. I said, I've just been very active. That's why I haven't put any weight on. Plus, I probably didn't eat as well as I should have. Well, after 4 weeks, he said, well, we're going to check you after 4 weeks and see how you're doing. Otherwise, we're going to send you to bugler school. So after 4 weeks, I had gone from 126 pounds to 145 pounds. And I went through the basic training, probably as well as anyone in the entire group. So that brings us up to that point.
Yeah.
Now, do you want me to go on from there?
No, I want to, can we back up a little
Sure,
bit?
back
How
up.
about high school? What'd you do there? Were you a football player?
No,
Obviously,
I love
honestly,
football, but I'm just not big enough.
not big enough to be a football player.
So I did play some park board football. In Minneapolis, they had parks, and all of them had football teams. I played on 2 teams. I played one that had a limit of 126 pounds, and another one that had a limit of 145 pounds. But I loved to play football. I played baseball when I lived in Waconia. I played for the American Legion team there. So I did play a lot of baseball. When I moved to Minneapolis, I started caddying and I started playing golf. And that became a passion for me as far as sports school.
You still play today?
I do, but I had heart surgery 5 years ago, and I have to use a cart, and I just don't enjoy the game like I used to.
Right.
And I don't play very well anymore. At one time, I was about a 6'7" handicap. I'm not anymore. So
Siblings?
Huh?
You have brothers and sisters?
I have one brother
Uh-huh.
who's dead. He was 12 years younger than I am. And I've got two sisters. One lives in San Diego, and one lived here in Prescott for a while. She didn't like it here because she wants green grass all around, so she moved back to Minnesota.
Mhm.
And I have 5 children. And my current wife has one son. So we have 4 daughters and 2 sons. I had 4 daughters before I had a son.
Uh-huh. Well, that's great. Okay, now let's go back to Alabama.
Okay, good old Anniston, Alabama,
Yeah,
Fort
okay.
McClellan. Well, I got down there, and as I say, after 4 weeks, I put on this weight, and I went along smooth, so they forgot all about bugler school.
Mhm.
So I trained as an infantryman down there, a rifleman, and we went on some long, horrendous hikes. I remember one I went on a 23-mile hike. The BAR man passed out, so I carried not only my own pack, my own M1, but his BAR in the last 3 miles. So I had been a kid that played a lot of golf and did a lot of caddying. I was used to being on my feet and walking a lot. And we walked to high school. I mean, I lived about a mile or 2 miles from the high school. We'd ride, I walked to school every day. I mean, kids nowadays, I mean, don't get me started on that.
No, I won't. Not that we
Okay.
don't agree with you too. Yeah. Okay, when you get your orders in basic, what happened? What were your first set of orders after
Well,
Alabama?
after, of course, we were in about the 13th week of basic training, or 14th week, and the Battle of the Bulge came. The Germans hit us, and they decided, we need replacements in Europe. So that did away with all of the training. We were gonna go to Japan. So they broke us up and sent us, I went from Fort McClellan to Minneapolis for supposedly a 14-day leave, and then back to Maryland, to Fort Meade, and from Fort Meade we shipped to France. Well, we went through England and we went across to Le Havre.
Mhm.
But, so we only got, the rest of the people from Minneapolis got 14 days of leave. They only gave me 10 days leave, which of course didn't make me very happy. So I talked to this captain and he said, well, that's the way it goes. So I thought, well, okay, we'll see. So I went home and I called the Red Cross and I said, my dad is sick. I want to stay an extra 4 days. I should have gotten 4 days more anyway. She said, well, we'll contact the military, army. Well, they turned me down. So I just stayed 4 days. So I reported to Fort Meade, and I was 4 days late. He says, you've been AWOL for 4 days. I says, what are you going to do, send me overseas? Oh, they didn't like my smart-ass attitude.
But they didn't.
No. So, nothing, of course, happened. I did go overseas with the rest of them.
Yeah, going
But
anyway.
I really thought I was entitled to the extra 4 days.
Uh-huh.
And I had a girlfriend, and we got engaged while I was there. And that's another story, of course. But, so I went there, from there we went across the Atlantic on the Queen Mary. And there were, 37,000 troops on that ship. We slept in the shifts. It was horrible.
I'll bet.
And seasick all the way. And the only thing really different we landed, of course, the ship landed in Scotland. And a day out of Scotland, a German plane came over. And the British were handling the ship. And they screamed, everyone, we all went up on deck to see the German plane fly over. And they're having fits. Get below deck, get down. The British are having fits. Well, he was just an observation plane, nothing happened. So we landed in Dundee, Scotland, and got on a train and went down to Liverpool and got on a French freighter to go across to Le Havre, across the English Channel, which is like 40 miles maybe. But then they had not been sending ships across the channel, had been sending them over unescorted. And they sank a ship with an American division on it, a regiment of American division. And the damn thing sank, and then they all died. So they decided, we better escort these freighters over. So we started out, and we thought we were going to North Africa, where they were dinging around. It took us 3 days to go across the channel. And then we land in Le Havre, and we're there and getting ready to go out. And I'll never forget this. They called us all together, and this major gets up there. And he said, you know, you've all heard about how dirty the Japanese and the Germans fight. I want to tell you something right now. No one fights any dirtier than Americans. And I thought, what in the hell is he saying? But that's what he said. So they put us on the old trains that they ran in World War II, what they call them. 40 men or 6 horses or something. Is what it was? Is that what it was? So they put us on one of these. It took us to go from Le Havre to Epinal, which is over on the Swiss border almost. It took us five days, because every meal time they had to stop that damn train and get out and cook a meal, and so it took forever to get there. So we finally got to Epinal, and was there, and they were dispersing us to different divisions. So they sent me and some of the people who were with me up to the 7th Infantry Division. And we went up there, and they sent us to 3rd Division headquarters. And a sergeant comes out and he says, anyone here from Minnesota? I said, yes, I'm from Minnesota. He said, okay, so he's come with me. So he says, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm putting you in the service company instead of sending you to an infantry regiment. I says, oh, that's that good. So, and he says, you're not going to have to do any fighting. So for a week, I was playing MP, directing traffic, you know, or else I was going out and picking up 105 shells and putting them in a truck. Well, that's hard work. So I did that for a week, and I thought, I don't like this. Plus the fact we were picking up stuff from the guys who were killed and supposedly packing it up, but what a lot of them were doing is just going through there and taking anything they wanted to send it home. So I said, went up to the sergeant. I said, I appreciate your wanting me to keep me here, but I said, I just didn't get assigned to an infantry company. So I did. I got assigned to I Company of the 276th Infantry Regiment. Mm-hmm. And they were in a town called Forbach, which is right close to the German border. And they had been up there. And one of the things there was, in fact, it's in this book someplace, there's a place called Castle Hill. Now, this is before, I joined them just after this. They took Castle Hill without any trouble. But then the Germans counterattacked. During the Battle of the Bulge, the Germans tried to push out from other places too, because the Americans or the Allies had weakened themselves to send people up to where the Battle of the Bulge was in Belgium. So they tried to take this hill back, and the company commander, I Company was holding that hill, called in artillery on the hill, American artillery, to counter the German attack. And I Company lost an awful lot of people. Well, most of them were wounded because they were dug in. And they held the hill. So they got an awful lot of replacements. Some of them were like myself. Some of them were Air Force people that they didn't need any more flyers, so they were putting them in the infantry. I had one guy in my squad who had been in a laundry company up in Iceland for 3 years. And this guy was a little funny after all that time. And, but this, so it was really a mishmash. A lot of them were people that were in college, that were in the Air Force ROTC program or something like that, and they came over and been people like myself. And we had one guy that came in that had a son in the Navy or the Marine Corps, and he was, I think he was 39 years old. He was from Arkansas. And he really was out of place, because most of us were young people like myself there, you know. We're 18, 19 years old. Even the ones that have been in the Air Force, the ROTC people, were no more than 19.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what the infantry companies were made of at that time. So do you want me just to go on?
Sure, sure.
Okay.
That's
So we
interesting.
stayed in Forbach, and we were shelling the Germans, and the Germans were shelling us somewhat. But there wasn't really much going on. And finally, we got orders that we're going to move out. And we went through this, underneath this, it was a railroad right through there, a big overpass. And we went under it and moved ahead, and we were held up by some fences. So with Bangalore torpedoes, we got holes through them, and this made me feel lucky. The guy that was before me to go through was shot. I went through, I got my jacket caught in the damn fence. And I'm struggling, I finally took it off. That shot was never fired at me. Finally got through and went into this house where our squad was, and the guy behind me was also shot. And he didn't have any trouble. So they all kidded me, you know, the Germans knew that you're more damn useless to the Army, let him alone, he'll cause them more problems. So we got there, and then I went up in this room I told you about, and was shooting. It was an M1 at this machine gun nest. Well, as it was, we stayed there, and then we moved out from there just as night was falling, and moved up a little farther, and stayed there. And then the sergeant came in, he says, Strong, he says, take 2 or 3 guys with you. There's some houses up there that are on higher ground. And he says, I want you to go up there and just look down the other side. It was on a hill, and see what's going on, and just stay up there. And we had a radio with us. So we went up there, and we were in this house. It was like a duplex. And we're here, and we hear voices, German voices over here. And the Germans had sent troops up the other half of this duplex to look down in our lines. I'm there looking down in the German lines. And this one guy says, let's go get them. I says, what do you mean, let's go get them? I said, they're going to hear us coming up the steps. They're not bothering us, just let them go. So the next morning they were gone. So that was the story of that. Well, then we
story.
Yeah, then we stayed there, and they sent us. There was a university in Forbach, and we went over there and we stayed there for a couple days, and then we moved out into the woods, because the Germans were in the woods and we were in the woods, and I was in a foxhole for about 2 to 3 weeks, and that was not fun, because you had to eat. You were eating K rations all the time, and I don't know in Vietnam if you had K rations.
Pretty close.
They were horrible, horrible. Those Cracker Jack boxes had awful stuff in them. We stayed there, and I was in a foxhole with a guy from Chicago named Eddie Prokof. And Eddie didn't like me any better than I did him. And what a miserable night. We'd spend all that time where we'd sleep during the night. He'd be on duty for 2 hours, and I'd be on duty for 2 hours. So you get 2 hours of sleep. Nothing ever happened. We did have a jet fly over one night, a German jet fighter. And there was, along the line there further, there was a little fighting going on. There'd be a German trying to come, doing some reconnoitering, or we would. And we had they shot this one German soldier out there, and it was in our company, but it wasn't in our platoon. He went out there and he cut the German's ears off. And he's showing them to everyone. Well, he made one big mistake. He showed him to Captain Andrews, our company commander. Well, he just lost it completely. He hit the kid on the side of the head with his .45. He says, you go back out there, you bury the ears, and you bury the German. I don't care if they fire on you or not, but you're gonna do that. And he did, and he told everyone, he says, we don't need this kind of thing. If they come back and find this guy has had his ears cut off, they're not gonna be very happy with us.
Mhm.
So, I mean, everyone did things they shouldn't be doing.
Mhm.
So, from there, we went back to this university in Forbach, which had big barracks. And we stayed there, and we thought, well, we're gonna get pulled off the line now, because the 70th had been on the line for a while. Well, then, they said, no, we moved ahead again. And we were right on the fringe of the 3rd Army and the 7th Army. And we were the last company. And there was some fighting going on there, but it was snowing and it was cold. And we finally got dug in up there, and we'd cut some branches and to put over the top of our foxhole so we'd stay dry. And then they pulled us back to the university again. And they said, you're gonna stay here. And then they decided we're gonna go and cross the Siegfried line. So we're gonna train to do that. So we go back into France, and we're training with boats across the river there. I forget what the river. We were gonna cross the Saar.
Mhm.
And we're there, and I don't know what, couldn't understand. We had a colonel who had been a general, he was a full colonel. He was a regimental commander, but he had been a colonel in World War I, which shows how capable he was. And his name was, I don't want to mention his name, but so they came up with this idea that I was going to go, and we were going up and attack these pillboxes. And with a flamethrower, but instead of shooting, to lit fuel in there. I don't know whose idea this was, but the guy with the flamethrower was going to shoot the fuel in unlit. And I was going to sneak up there and throw a phosphorus grenade in there to ignite it. I could never understand what the hell they were thinking about. Well, we did this training, and then they pulled us back. And then on the 15th of March, they had this, well, it was the 13th. 2 days before, they were gonna move ahead. This is one of the last big battles of World War II in Europe, when they attacked the Saar, went across the Saar River and attacked the Siegfried line. We went up there, and I've never seen the company or our squad or our platoon so quiet. We went up there, and they had told us that they were going to have artillery lined up wheel to wheel, and they were going to have bombers continually blasting the Germans' defenses on the other side of the Saar River. Well, there was some artillery fire, and there was a couple planes went over. But finally, we were going to attack, and one of the battalion commanders says, "I'm not sending my men up there." Well, they tried to cross it, and the engineers couldn't get a boat to the river because the Germans had their machine guns on rails, you know, and they had perfect fields of, I mean, they had great, that Siegfried line had great defensemen. So another battalion commander said, he's not gonna go, and our battalion commander. So we were sitting there in this town, and finally the trucks come up and we go back to where we were. 2 days later, we crossed on a pontoon bridge because they had gotten through on the Rhine and had come down the back of them at the Remagen, Remagen Bridge.
Right.
They'd gone through at the Remagen Bridge and the Germans just pulled back. So we just went across, I think one guy stepped on a landmine in the entire company. And otherwise it was, we would probably had real heavy casualties. So, and by that time, the war was winding down pretty well. So from there, we went up to a town called Stromberg, and this was between Germany and France. It was in a forest, and we just were clearing a forest and shooting boars is what we were doing, because there were a lot of wild pigs, big ones. And we stayed in this little town for about 3 days, and then we went up and we crossed the Rhine River and went to Frankfurt. And there was no problems there. And then we went back down to Mannheim on the Rhine, and we were just in guarding. That way we were off the line by that time. And we stayed there, and from there we went to Schweinfurt. And I was in Schweinfurt when the war ended with Germany. But so the only bad thing about that I remember was when we were in Mannheim, a tank division came through, and I don't think they hadn't been in any combat. I don't think they were just replacements that had come over, and there was nothing going on. But as the tanks went through, we're just more or less roadblock, and we were just directing traffic through there. And there was an old German man and a little boy in a field. And for some reason, this tank crew opens up on him with a 50 caliber machine gun from the turret and kills them both. For no reason. But that's the way things went.
The war was over then?
No, the war didn't end until April or May 8th.
Yeah, but went over.
Yeah, it was, for all basic purposes, the war was over. Yeah, there was no fighting there. We were just holding that, more or less as acting as MPs on this highway, on the Autobahn there. And so then we went to Schweinfurt. Schweinfurt was a big ball-bearing town. It basically had a lot of Swedes had worked there during the war, or before the war. It was owned by the Swedish government, our company. So we were there when the war ended. We were guarding a DP camp. DP camp was a displaced persons. The Germans had brought people in from all over Europe to work.
Right.
And to this day, I don't know if it's the UN or if it was the military, the Allies, to put these camps together. This was an old German concern, which was a big German army camp, and they had these DPs. We had Polish people, we had Russian people, we had French people, we had Italians, Belgian, all kinds of nationalities. And they just had these people in this damn camp. Well, we found out that they were hauling a couple dead people a night out of there from gunshot wounds. So the captain says, something's going on, there shouldn't be all those guns in there. So we went in and checked everything out. We found a huge arms depot in the basement of this place. So he said, well, get them out of there. So we had to get all these guns out. And there was all kinds of different, old French army rifles, all kinds of stuff. In fact, in this group there was a Mauser single shot 22 match rifle that the Germans had used in the Olympics in 1936. Well, I decided I'd confiscate that, you know, since leaving there. I've still got it.
Great.
I'm gonna give it to one of my grandsons. And
That's
it's a Mauser, a regular Mauser rifle, but it's a 22 caliber. Thing's as heavy as a 30 caliber
Yeah.
and accurate. My God. I mean, even I could shoot well with that.
Mhm.
And I was a good shot. But I've still got that, and I sent that home, and I sent home a French rifle that was evidently used in World War I.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So, but when we left there, in fact, the night the war ended, the night the Germans surrendered, I was there, and I was with a French girl that lived there. She had, which was quite a story. I'm going to get sidetracked here.
It's okay.
She had married a German flyer in France, probably in 1943. And she was part of the Free French. She was a French intelligence person, a young woman. And she married him and then came back to Germany with him and really fell in love with him and didn't report to the Free French anymore. Her name was Jacqueline Tremaine, is what her name was. And I had spent some time with her, and she was a very, 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 very fine girl. And I was with her the night that the Germans surrendered. And 2 days later, we were going to go on a picnic. I had gotten a hold of the captain and gotten a okay from him to take a Jeep and get some food, and we were going to go on a little picnic, her and I. I went to pick her up, and she was gone. And her neighbors in this apartment building where she lived, Germans, women, this one who I knew quite well too, she was crying. And she told me what happened, that the French came and picked Jacqueline up. So that was the end of that story. But later on, to finish this whole thing up, I always wanted to write a story about this, but I just don't have the ambition. But I was in Schweinfurt then later on when I was doing public relations work. I was a reporter. I lived in Schweinfurt, and I thought, I'm going to back up that apartment and see if anyone's ever heard anything. And I did, and this German woman was still living there, and I talked to her. She remembered me. She said, yeah, she's heard from Jacqueline. The French picked her up, took her back to France, but when she explained what happened, the French thought, well, that's the way things are, you know.
Mhm.
She fell in love with this German. She didn't hurt us. She didn't help us, but she didn't hurt us. So she was working for a French station, a radio station in Salisbury. And of course, that's the last so she wasn't punished in any way. But it shows that the French had some
Yeah.
sympathy for things,
Sure.
which is understandable. I mean,
Oh,
so
yeah.
many things happen that,
In the wartime.
that's
certainly.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people they don't understand that, you know. Well, anyway, so from there, we went to a little town called Atzbach. And there we had so many troops over there that they had them in every little French town, you know. And we just go in and the army would take over a couple of homes and we'd live in these houses. And we stayed there, and then we went from there to another town. It was a little bigger town, and that's where we were when they dropped the bomb on the Japanese. So that's when the war ended, and but we supposedly were training to go to
Pacific.
the Pacific. Well, then after that was ended, they just decided, well, we got to get. They started sending troops home, and as I say, they took the old divisions that had a lot of people in it that had enough points. Everything was. Did they do it since Vietnam too? Have a point system? No.
No.
Well, we had a point system, so the more points you had, the sooner you went home. So most of my friends and I went over to the 3rd Infantry Division, which was an altogether different story. The 3rd had been It was an old Army division, one of the old ones. And they had fought well in World War II, or World War One. They fought very hard in many battles. They were at Anzio, Sicily, and during World War. In fact, when I was with them, I read that they had gotten more Medal of Honor winners in the 3rd Infantry Division in World War II than the Marine Corps, the entire Marine Corps. And I just finished that book, Flag of Our Fathers, and the Marines were pretty good at giving out Congressional Medal of Honors too. But anyway, so the 3rd did see them, and they were pretty much spit and polish. And some of us had gotten, especially some of the guys that had been in them at college and had been in the Air Force Reserves, they were not too big on all of this marching around. And I always had a little trouble telling my right from my left anyway. So they had about 12 of us. The 3rd Infantry Division said, we're going to teach these guys how to march. The Germans thought this was just hilarious, you know. We've got these guys and they're teaching us like we're a bunch of recruits on how to march. And we, of course, don't have our heart in it. It was sort of a comedy of errors. And so we were there, and then we decided, well, we were pulling some guard duty because there was nothing to do. So they had a college in Eschwege, Germany, which is where the British, American, and the Russian zones came together. So they said, if you want to go, and you had your intelligence, what the IQ test that they give you when you went in the service behind, they'd send you up there. So we all went up there. All my friends and I went up there. And what we did up there, I don't know. We went deer hunting, and we went out and found all the wine and schnapps we could drink. It was like living in a Wild West. Everyone wore sidearms. We'd play poker all night long, and there was always just shooting out the street. It was just unbelievable. And we had some girlfriends, and they didn't have much food, so we'd go to the Red Cross and tell them we had a patrol out here and we needed some donuts and some sandwiches, and pick it up. So we were feeding some of the Germans this way, which the Army didn't approve of. We weren't supposed to really fraternize with the Germans. But we went there, and then finally they decided the school wasn't working out. So I figured, what am I going to do now? So they sent me back to the company. Well, then I found out that they had a basketball team. So I went out for the basketball team. Well, it was fine until they started getting more and more replacements coming over that were bigger than I were, and I could see that wasn't going to work out. So I decided, well, they needed a sax player in the band. I had played a clarinet when I was in high school, and I thought, well, hell, I can learn to play sax. Well, I couldn't. So then the boxing team, well, I thought, I'll go out for the boxing team. Anything to get out of pulling guard duty. Well, I was fine in the gym, you know, I'm good on the bag, but then they wanted me to start fighting people. So I thought, well, this isn't going to work out either. And I saw that the public relations office needed a reporter. So I applied for that, and I got the job. So I went back to the division headquarters in Kassel, Germany, and we had a printing plant. At one time, we were printing a paper every day, which was ridiculous. With German linotype operators, and we didn't speak that good of German, they didn't read that good of English, and it was a complete fiasco. So finally we settled on a weekly paper. And we put out a good paper for the division. It was called The Front Line. And so then from there we went to, I went down then to Wetzlar in Germany, and as a reporter there. And then they sent me over to Schweinfurt with the 15th Infantry Regiment. And we got down there, and the 15th Infantry Regiment had a band, a regimental band, which was a dance band. And they played all over. And these guys were all real good musicians. They were professional musicians that had been drafted. But they put on an act that was unbelievable. They'd walk around to mess with one guy's hand on the next guy's shoulder, and then they drag their feet like they got shackles on, you know. And they didn't shave, they were dirty. And they just wanted to get out of living in a barracks. So I had gotten to know Colonel Edson, who was the regimental commander, because being in a public relations officer, most people want you to write about them and send their dispatches back to their hometown papers, which is you get to know them and they treat you pretty well. So Colonel Edson says, "What is wrong with those guys?" He says, "You're with them all the time." I said, "Well, Colonel," I said, "they're out playing jobs at night. They shouldn't be in there. They shouldn't be living in a barracks. They should have their own accommodations." And, well, he says, "You know of any?" Well, I said, I know from from the sergeant major of the regiment that there's a house we could take over. It was owned by the Swedes. And so we moved in there. And that's what this guy was a trumpet player.
Okay. Well, which one was it?
The dark-haired guy. This is
dark-
me, the other one, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So we lived in that house. We had a refrigerator. We had everything. I mean, it was really a nice house.
Uh-huh.
And we lived there for, well, they stayed there. And then finally I went back to the division headquarters to take over as sports editor of the paper. But I had some great days there, and we played poker a lot. And the poker games, of course, we were playing with occupation money. And it didn't mean anything to us. And so it's always $20 on the side for a high spade in every hand. So 20 marks on the side. And then the Army, of course, I'm getting sidetracked here a bit, but maybe this is interesting that some people weren't there. They were paying you, there was no control, so you could take that money and turn it into, if you wanted to stand in line long enough, you could turn that occupation money through money orders and send it home. Well, when they found out some guy in Berlin had sent over $200,000 home in a period of about 2 months, he must have been in line all the time, because I happened to talk to one of the finance officers up there. He said the guy had to spend in line, or had people standing in line, because I think he could get $500 at a time. Anyway, so they came up with the idea that they'll issue a pay book, and you put your pay in there, and all you could send home was what you had gotten in pay, which was a good idea, except, as devious as people are, they made copies of the pay book. And they had 2 pay books, or 3 pay books. Well, then they said, well, then they had people buying a lot of stuff in the PXs and sending that home. So they decided what they'd do is anytime you spent more than $20 in the PX, that had to be deducted. So you had all this paperwork to go through. And of course, and you'd still buy stuff, and people, I mean, it was just ridiculous the amount of money that people, and some of it was even more devious than that. We had people sending home burp guns, which was a German automatic weapon. It was we didn't have anything to really compare it to. It was a cheap automatic weapon. It fired a lot of rounds per minute. But we had people breaking this down, and of course that's one thing the military finally did about sending weapons through. They'd X-ray everything, but you could take a radio. I had a guy do this. Took a metal radio, or a radio in a metal case, and he took everything out, and he'd take these burp guns and put them inside there, and it'll go through the X-ray, and it would just throw one of these radios. And I mean, those things were very valuable, I guess. This guy was from Chicago, and he said they were very valuable. So it became a real mess, anyway.
Uh-huh.
So I stayed there, and finally, when I left the 15th in Schweinfurt. Colonel, or the sergeant major I had was the 15th Infantry Regiment. His name was Patterson. His father was at that time president of Pan American Airlines. His father had been a career military man, and Portman, his name was. And Fred went in to service. Our war started. His grandfather said, "You serve in the military until you can retire." And he was a very wealthy man. He said, "I'll give you $20 million." That was a lot of money in those days.
Really
So
was.
Fred was no fool. If he got a commission, which he could have gotten, it was stunning to be a priest. And so he enlisted, so he could get out. Well, he was like he and Edson ran that division, a colonel. So he said, "Well, you're leaving, Dick. I'm going to have a big party for you." So he threw a party in Schweinfurt there, and where he had, there must have been 10 Red Cross girls from all over Germany came. We had a party. It must have lasted a day and a half. Great food, everything you could drink. So then I left there and I went back to division headquarters, which was in Wiesbaden, not Wiesbaden, Bad Wildungen, which was a resort. And I stayed there then until I came home in June or July of '46. So.
And you're still in the Armed Forces Network, you're still a reporter right then?
Oh, yeah.
When you came home?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I did that. Well, they closed the paper up then, just as I was leaving, I guess they were, well, they closed it after I left because there were guys there. But they had a farewell edition of the paper, and which I got later on from the guys there. But the third came home too then, I guess. But so that brings us up to the end of it. Well, we came back through Hamburg, and instead of 5 days on the ocean like we did going over, it took us about 3 weeks on a freighter.
Mm-hmm. You have an experience that you had in a mental hospital. You want to touch that one?
Oh, yeah, I forgot that.
Well, let's not forget those good
No.
things.
Well, I was, this is, trying to get this. Oh, I was in Wetzlar. I was with the 7th Infantry Regiment. And a guy came in and he said that they've got a guy in what the heck was the name of that town? I think I told, I mean, these names of these towns slipped in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a mental hospital there, and he said that they had a guy there that said he was Adolf Hitler. So I said, well, that's interesting. So I called Lieutenant Gladwin, who was our public relations officer. I hadn't been doing this that long. And he said, well, get down there right away and talk to this guy. And he says, don't talk to anyone else about it, because if this guy is really Hitler, we're going to really have a story.
Mm-hmm.
And he was right. So I went down there, and this guy's name was Anton Schoeffer, A.S. And Hitler's real name was Adolf Schicklgruber, of course. So, and he had a tattoo, and he was conning these people. He really was. Well, he had them fooled pretty well, because he looked a lot like Hitler. He was about the same age, same funny mustache and all, you know. It was like Charlie Chaplin. So there was a doctor there, a German doctor, and he said, well, he had met Hitler. And he says, I know he looks a lot like Hitler. And he claims to be Hitler, but he said, he's not Adolf Hitler. So, but we kept the story undercover, and we finally put it out as a man that claimed it. And then I later on, when I was going to college, in journalism school in Minnesota, I wrote an article about the baker that looked like Adolf Hitler. And it was picked up by VFW magazine, paid me for it. I got an A in the course because I sold, sold an article. And I've got that someplace. My kids are fighting all over that, they wanna keep that. So,
Yeah, that's a
but
neat
it
story.
was a pretty good story, and the guy
Yeah.
he had a lot of people fooled. He, especially the people at the hospital, they were convinced that he was Adolf Hitler. So,
What a find, huh?
yeah.
Yeah. So when you got home, what happened? Where'd you get when you got home on the freighter? What happened then?
Well, we came home through, landed at Fort Dix, and came home from there. I went to Chicago and Fort Sheridan, and I was discharged at Fort Sheridan. So, and I came home and started school that fall. And, oh, the girlfriend I had that I was engaged to, while we're in Germany fighting, this is a good story too. I got a Dear John letter from him. I could tell things were cooling off a bit. Because it was emails. Did you ever see an email?
No, I never did.
Well, a lot of people haven't. You've seen them though. Well, they did. They write a letter, and then the government would photocopy it. And you get this little letter like this. It was called an email, or V-mail, and you couldn't hardly read the damn thing, you know. And they sent them, and they went faster than the regular mail.
Mail. Yeah.
But I finally did get this Dear John letter from Darlene, and I kept it for a long time because it was a priceless Dear John letter. They all sounded the same. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, you know. So she, shortly after I left to go overseas, an old boyfriend of hers who was a sailor came home, and she ended up marrying him. And I saw her after the war, after I got home, but that's not here, there, nor there. But my mother was crushed. She thought I might kill myself. So, and she was great to contact people in Congress and write to the President Roosevelt and everything else to find out what's happening to her little boy. So she contacted them, and they contacted the 70th Infantry Division. And I'm there, and I get a call one day. Oh, that's when we were in the foxhole. I was with Eddie Brokaw. To come back to division headquarters. Or to company headquarters first, and I went to regimental headquarters. So I come back and I said, what was all that about? I said, oh, you wouldn't believe it. They made a big mistake and they're sending me home. But my mother was so concerned. And I went in and talked to chaplain and said, son, he said, I've got some bad news for you. I says, would something happen to my mother or dad? No. He says, your girlfriend just broke off your engagement. I said, oh, I know all about that. So I had gotten a Dear John letter before this came through. But there was a lot of mothers that did that. I had a friend that had gotten a Silver Star that was in the band with me. And he was a singer from Philadelphia. And his mother got the Army so upset that Jesse had to write a letter once a week and take it in and give it to the commanding officer so he could send it home. But,
She went up that high in the chain of command, huh?
yeah.
Bug a lot of people.
Oh, well, it had to be I would have hated to be in the position of some of those people, having some of these women screaming at me, you know. So, but there was some things that, it's amazing. I had when I was in the division, back in Wildungen, just before I came, Bad Wildungen, before I came home, I was in my office one day, and this man comes in, and he was a civilian, and introduces himself. He was a congressman from California. And he says, he says, I'm trying to find out about what happened to my boys. They were both with the 70th Infantry Division. He says, no one seems to remember anything or know anything about it that was here. He said, you know of anyone? I said, well, the only one that would possibly have been around when this incident happened in Italy was the chaplain. Colonel Smith, his name was. He was a Catholic priest. Tough guy. Boy, he was a tough guy. And I had gotten to know him because he had picked me up on the road one time when I was coming back from Frankfurt to Badville, Duggan. So I said, I'll see if he knows anything about it. So I got a hold of him, and he had gave him the name of the family. He says, I don't want to talk to him about it because I don't want to lie to the man. And I said, well, what should I tell him? He says, just tell him that they died. They were killed in action, which is what they had told him. What had happened, though, what Smith told me, that they were in Italy, they were offline, and they were teaching troops how to use a bazooka. And there were some shells that were defective. That instead of disposing of them, they sent them back to the depot, and these shells gone. And these two, they were both officers, and the damn tube blew up and killed them both. And I think this congressman thought there was something strange about it, that they would both be killed at the same time, because he would have heard from them, and he knew they were off the line. And now there's some strange things happen, as you probably both realize. I just finished a book that my son gave me about, it's called A Day of Battle. It's about the war from when they landed in Sicily and then went into Italy, about the army, or I wouldn't say the army, but the government decided that the Germans might be using poison gas. So they send a whole shipload of mustard gas to North Africa in case they had to use it, which is probably a good idea. But so it sits there in a port in North Africa, and when they go into Italy, they take that damn ship full, and the Germans had not used any poison gas anywhere. They moved it up to Italy, to the, what's the name of it, Bari, coast, a port. And then the damn ship is hit by a German air raid, and this mustard gas gets all over the place. Kills a lot of Italians, kills Americans. And this is something that was kept completely secret until this guy wrote this book about it.
Mhm.
So,
Those things happen in war. you
That's
know,
right.
And they really do.
that's right.
So many things that we don't know about.
But, yeah, and they did a good job of keeping things undercover, evidently. So,
So let's get back to where you were. After you get discharged and you go back to schools, all right?
right.
Okay. And get a degree?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
got a degree in journalism. I was a journalism graduate from the University of Minnesota.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of my friends that have been veterans, let's face it, things were not very good in 1949 when we graduated from college.
Yeah.
So the Army, a lot of them were getting field commissions, or getting commissions. You had a college degree, you could get a commission. And you could go to training once a month and you get paid, and you go to summer camp and you get paid. So, hell, I thought, they said, this is a good way of picking up some extra money. So I went down and talked to them, and I said, yeah, sure. They said, fine. So they said, we won't pay for a physical for you, but you're gonna get a commission. You've got to pay for your own, from your own doctor. So I said, okay. So I got everything filled out, got all ready to go, and then the Korean War starts. And a couple of my friends that had done this were called. And I thought, oh, I'm married, I got a little girl. I decided, no, I just won't do anything. I just sat there, and I could have used the money. But I didn't do it, and I got a call from him. He said, "Oh, you don't have to worry, Strong. We don't need any public relations officers in Korea." But I had been a squad leader in the infantry, and they sure could use those people, or a platoon leader in the infantry.
Wow.
So I never did,
No.
I've still got the paperwork someplace around, but,
Never did any of that.
No.
Never got back into the reserves then.
no,
No.
no,
Okay.
no. Are you in the reserves?
No,
either?
no, and then never did the research.
No. No, I never did get in the reserves. And I had a friend that was in journalism school with me that had been a tail gunner, and they called him back. He'd gotten a commission. He went back in during the Korean War and was killed. So I didn't know this at the time. I mean, it happened after this whole episode. But, so then it was tough getting a job, and I had worked as a clothing salesman, or I worked packing clothing for a garment manufacturer in Minneapolis. So they offered me a job, and I had job offers for Newsday in New York, which is a good newspaper, started by Mrs. Patterson, that just started it. But the job paid $200 a month, but I had to transport myself and my family from Minneapolis to Long Island, and the cost of living there, I mean, there was just no way you could work it out. And I had one other job offer on a daily in Chaska, or a weekly in Chaska, Minnesota. And I had an offer from the state of Minnesota, which I had an uncle working for me. He says, "Don't take that job." So I decided I'd stay with XL Garment. And they said, "Well, we're gonna open some territories." So I went out and opened up Montana, North and South Dakota, Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming for them. They'd never had any representative out there. So I did that, that's what I did. Well, after they trained me in Michigan, traveling with a salesman there. And it was a straight commission job. And I went out there and I opened a few new accounts. But then I was also handling their advertising in Minneapolis. And then they decided, I noticed there's some copies of orders being shipped that I wasn't given commission on. So I called them on it. And they said, "Well, if you don't like it, you can leave." I said, "Well, I don't." I said, "I'll work here. If you want me to handle your advertising, pay me for it, and I'll work there. I'll forget about it." He says he's got a nephew that has got an airplane, and he can fly that territory and cover it much better. So they sort of more or less used me. So I made an ultimatum. I said, "Okay, make up your mind what you're gonna do." I said, "If you want me to continue on with you and pay me a month salary for doing what I'm doing here with your advertising, or pay me my commissions that I earned, or I'm gonna leave." I said, I'll give you 2 weeks. Well, they decided not to. So I left. And then they blackballed me. I had a job, Procter & Gamble hired me, and I went to report to work, and he said, "I'm sorry, you're not the type of person we want." I said, "What the hell's going on here?" And then I had a paper company wanted to hire me because I travel in Montana, and they want to send me out there. Give me the same thing. So I thought, well, something's not right here. So I had someone check on it, another one company, and they said, "Well, yeah, you're getting a bad recommendation from this manager." Well, finally, then I finally ended up going to work with 3M. And when 3M hired me, I told them who to contact with this company who I knew was a fair person, and he gave me a very good recommendation. And I worked with 3M all my life.
Mhm.
So
Did you keep in touch with anybody in the service, or do you know anybody today that you knew back then?
I did at first, and I got a call from guy that worked in the paper with me. And when I was living in Denver, probably 30 years ago, 35 years ago. That's the last,
That's it.
the last, we did, I don't know, I never did. The 70th Infantry Division had a reunion in Denver about 35 years ago. And I didn't go to that. I had some problems with a wife. My first wife was not the most stable person in the world. So I went through a period there where I was working and I was doing all right, but I just didn't get to do anything else but. And so I didn't keep in touch with people. Now I know some people have. You probably have got people you kept in touch with. I was never really in one place that long. I think you've got to be in a combat unit for a while and be with the same people. The only one that I was around that much was Eddie Prokof, and I sure didn't want to see him again, and he didn't want to see me again, because that's, it's awful to be in that condition. I mean, at times I'd look at him at night, and he's sleeping, and I'm there with my M1 rifle. I thought, God, I could blow this guy's head off. And he probably thought the same thing about me. It's not a nice feeling.
Yeah.
So, and I had a couple of them right after the war. I saw them, and a couple of them I did see one other when I was in Cleveland. That must have been 1961. A friend of mine did come by and spent an evening with him. But today, I mean, it's funny. You don't have too many good friends. And the older you get, the fewer you have.
That's true. Does the 70th Infantry or anybody that you were with in World War II, do they have reunions till today?
Well, they had one in Denver, as I said.
Yeah, that's what I
But
mean.
that's the last one that I ever heard of, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think they do anymore, because they really weren't, they were sort of a made-up division.
Yeah.
I think it was part of I don't really know what the background of it was. The third, of course, I'm sure they still have, because they're in Iraq now. And they're undoubtedly a very fine, there were some very fine divisions.
Yeah.
And some of them weren't worth a damn. But like the Battle of the Bulge, a lot of that equipment the Germans had was captured from the 45th Division, the New York National Guard. They were a big hero division in World War I, and they were a complete flop in World War II. And they used to have a saying about an infantry division. They have one man shooting, 2 men looting, and 3 men painting signs. Because wherever you went, they had their division sign painted.
Yeah.
And
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the pictures you have here? You told us about one. How about the one nearest you that you said you had in Switzerland? Is that?
oh yeah, well, I went to Switzerland. I should have covered that.
Well.
As I say, the Army decided that they had to find places that let troops take some leave, because we weren't coming home. We were going to serve over there after the war, and for a year or a year and a half at least, and which wasn't bad duty, but. So they talked to the Swiss government. The Swiss government says, "Oh yes, we'll be glad to have Americans come in here, but we have certain restrictions. We're going to keep your groups down to about 25 troops at a time in the city, because they can see too what was happening. You get any young people that age full of the testosterone they're full of, they're going to act up."
Yeah.
So that's what the Swiss did. Well, I went down there with a couple other public relations people to write about Switzerland and encourage people to go. And I got down to Switzerland, went into Geneva, and went to Lausanne. And that's where I met this gal. We got on a train, we were going up to a ski resort called, God, now I forget what it was now, but it's a very famous ski resort. And she is on the train with her sister. This is her sister and her brother. And they're big skiers. They're young people. Probably I think she was probably in college, and her younger sister is younger. So we got on the train, and I started talking to her, and we ended up staying at the same resort. And that was an interesting story. There was a Swiss professor there named Hans Zbinden, Zbinden. And he was a good friend of her family. And Klingers were the girls' names, Moody Klinger. And so I'd have dinner with them every night. And I'll never forget old Franz Zbinden. He'd look down over his glasses and he'd shake his finger in my face and he says, "You Americans are going to regret the day that you gave the right to vote to everyone." And of course I thought, that's a hell of a thing to say, being a good, democratic American person. But he was right. The more I thought about it later on, he did. I mean, some people just don't know what the hell they're doing. I shouldn't say this. This is going to the government files, and I'll expect you to protect me, Pat.
She will.
But so I was there, and they taught me to ski a bit. I had skied a little as a kid in Minnesota, but I learned to ski a little bit there, and I had her address, but I never did correspond with her again. And then we came back, but I wrote articles about Switzerland, and we did send a lot of people down there, but you couldn't believe how well everyone behaved down there.
That's good.
So,
And who's this handsome gentleman over here on the left here?
me?
That's right.
That's me.
And that's you in boot camp, or is that?
I was just inducted. I probably wasn't in boot camp yet, no. No, I've got, yeah, I guess so. I'm probably, I don't know when that was taken. Well, it was taken, my girlfriend and my fiance, she worked for a photographer, and I had a lot of pictures, and I had a lot of pictures. I had on inside of my helmet liner, I kept a bunch of pictures of my family and her and friends of mine that I went to high school with, and I kept those inside my helmet liner all during the war. And I had given a few of them away to people I'd met over there, and I don't ever know what happened to them. So,
The map in the middle.
well, the map in the middle, this was taken towards the end of the war, I'm sure. This shows the movement of the 7th Infantry, the 3rd Army, or 7th Army, 3rd Army, and yeah, we were down here in the 7th Army, and then Homer Bradley was the commanding general of the 7th Army. 3rd Army, of course, was commanded by George Patton. 1st Army, I forget now who was that, and but this, see, here we came in. We went into Frankfurt. We were right on the border with the 3rd Army, and they were pretty much an armored outfit. And Patton did make his tankers move. And he kept them up there with you too. And 7th Army, the tankers, some of them, they'd come up and they'd be around and fire a few rounds enough to get German artillery on you, and then they'd leave.
And what are we sharing here?
Well,
Share with us what you have here in your scrapbook.
let's see, I think mainly this is just things my mother had clipped out, and she did a good job of keeping this up. You know, it's strange, though, that during World War II, the two theaters of war didn't seem to keep up very much with each other as far as information. I knew very little about what was going on in the Pacific, and I thought I was pretty well aware. I was always been interested in news, and that I would know that, but I just finished this book on flags of our fathers, and I wasn't aware of all of that.
Even as a reporter, you weren't, huh? You
No.
kept up a little more then?
No, this was during the war.
During the war?
No,
During
no,
the
as being a reporter.
Yeah.
No, you didn't really have time to do anything. We, for example, I remember, we did not change our clothes, our underwear, anything from when we were in Forbach until after we came off the line, which is about 2 months later. And we went into this German town, it was a mine or a steel mill, because we took a shower in this building. We had to put our clothes on a chain and pull them up, and then you take a shower. And so they were up out of the water. And then we'd go out and they'd give us new clothes. Here's a whole company of GIs, bare ass, on the street, getting new clothes. Which is, it sounds ridiculous, but it was true. We just didn't. Now, it wasn't that we were in a swamp or something like that, but still, and it was in the wintertime. I got over there, I think it must have been late January, and we came off the line on probably about the 16th or 17th of March. Maybe it was a little later than that. But that's when we got our first shower. So, and we weren't living in houses, or we were living in foxholes, but the houses, most of the homes over there they don't have central heating, they don't have central plumbing, and it's...
Running water, yeah.
No, that's right. So, but,
Well, as we close out now, Richard Strong, is there anything you'd like to add to what you talked about? Andy?
no, I just appreciate the time,
Okay.
and I hope I haven't offended anybody.
No, I don't think so. I don't, you know,
Well, Pat doesn't think I have any.
No, and you don't know how many people are gonna watch this later on and say, man, well, you know, you were just really open. I really appreciate that you were, you know, just kind of
Well,
honest.
I thought that's the way I do. I mean, there was some good things and there was some bad things.
bet.
And this is true, I'm sure, of everything.
Uh-huh.
One closing thing I find sort of funny, I had my great-great-grandfather was in the Civil War, and he was in the Minnesota National Guard, or Reserves or whatever. And his entire war spent chasing Indians, because the Indians did act up, the Sioux Indians did act up in the Civil War, towards the end of the war. So my great-great-uncle, John Strong, was out there fighting the Indians. And he wrote a diary about it. It's about 150 pages long, which I have got a copy of. I got a cousin that got into this and got it all for it. And I'm telling my kids at a family reunion about 6 years ago about how their ancestor was out chasing the Sioux Indians during the Civil War. Well, they kids, and I evidently don't speak too clear, they thought I said 2 Indians. And they thought, what is wrong with this family? They got a regiment of Minnesotans chasing 2 Indians all over the Montana and North and South Dakota. But,
Yeah. Well, you know, thank you for sharing with
Well,
us.
thank you.
for spending the time with us, and
Okay.
we appreciate you know,
well, I wish
everything
I
we've
could have
heard.
gotten more stuff in here.
Well,
but,
that's okay. You got some, and we appreciate that.
Okay.
Trust me. We really do.